The ticket was still in my coat pocket when Derek said it. I hadn't even told anyone yet. Hadn't called my daughter, hadn't called my lawyer, hadn't done anything except sit in my car for 40 minutes outside the convenience store on Route 9, hyperventilating into a fast food napkin, staring at numbers that didn't feel real. $95 million. The Powerball drawing had been 2 nights ago. I'd bought the ticket on impulse, the way I always do, the way my late wife Carol used to tease me about. "Ray, you have a better chance of getting struck by lightning twice." She said it every time. Same smile, same dimple on the left side. I'd kept buying anyway. Not because I believed I'd win, more because hope costs $2, and some weeks that's the only $2 I spend on myself. Carol passed 4 years ago, pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. 11 weeks isn't enough time to say everything you need to say to a person you've spent 31 years next to. I was 63 years old, retired from 30 years in civil engineering, living alone in a 4-bedroom house in Ashford, Connecticut, that was too quiet in the evenings and too full of her ghost everywhere else. And now I had $95 million and no idea what to do with it. I drove to my daughter's house that Sunday because it was our usual dinner. I hadn't planned to say anything yet. I just needed to be around family, needed to see Sophie's face, hear her laugh, even tolerate Derek hovering near the kitchen like he owned the air in every room. Sophie is 34. She has Carol's eyes, that particular shade of green that shifts to gray in low light. She's warm and funny and has a stubbornness that I used to think she got from me until I realized it might just be survival instinct from living with a man like Derek Pruitt for 6 years. I never loved Derek. That's not something a father is supposed to admit, but I'm past the age of decorating truth. He had a salesman's charm, always the loudest laugh in the room, always the one steering conversations back to himself, always knowing exactly what to say to make you feel slightly smaller than you did before. He worked in commercial real estate and dressed like he was always mid-negotiation. Sophie had met him at a conference, fallen hard inside 3 months, and married him in a vineyard wedding that Derek had insisted on partly financing himself, which he brought up at least once every family gathering. He didn't hit her. Nothing that clean. It was subtler. The mild put-downs dressed as jokes, the way he interrupted her mid-sentence, and then finished her thought wrong, the way he made her feel like her instincts were always slightly off. I'd said something to Sophie once, gently. She'd looked at me with an exhaustion I recognized, the kind that comes from having already thought through every concern you're about to raise, and said, "Dad, I know who he is. I'm handling it." So I let it be. That Sunday, I brought a bottle of Malbec and a bakery box from the place on Elm Street that Carol used to love. Sophie hugged me at the door. The house smelled like rosemary chicken. Everything was normal. Until Derek came in from the garage. He was on the phone, one finger up, give me a minute, pacing the kitchen tile, talking to someone about a deal in Stamford. Sophie and I sat at the island. She poured wine. We talked about her job. She's a speech therapist at an elementary school, and about a small leak she'd found in their bathroom ceiling. Normal things. Derek finally hung up and dropped into the chair across from me, didn't say hello. Picked up his wine glass and said, "You look pale, Ray. You feeling okay?" I said I was fine, tired. He tilted his head with that expression he had, performative concern, the kind that's really an observation about your weakness. "You know, I was reading that men your age who live alone after losing a spouse, the health decline can be pretty significant. Statistically," he shrugged. "Just something to be aware of." Sophie said, "Derek?" He spread his hands. "I'm just being honest. I care about Ray." I looked at him across the table. The ticket was in my coat pocket, hanging on the hook by the front door. $95 million, folded into a square, tucked behind a dry cleaning receipt. I didn't say a word. 2 weeks later, I'd spoken to a lottery attorney named Marcus Webb, a financial advisor in Hartford, and my personal lawyer, Donna Castellano, who'd handled my estate since Carol's death. We'd set up a trust. I'd taken the lump sum. After taxes, I was looking at roughly $51 million. I had not told a single family member. The plan had been to tell Sophie quietly, privately, take her to lunch, and explain everything before it went public. The Lottery Commission had a 60-day window before a press release. I had time. But Derek found out first. I don't know exactly how. My guess is he knew someone at the regional lottery office. He had connections everywhere. That was his whole identity. Or maybe he'd seen something on my computer when he'd come to help me with a Wi-Fi issue that I now suspect was never actually an issue at all. Either way, he knew. He came to my house on a Thursday evening without calling ahead. That alone told me something was wrong. Derek always called ahead. He liked entrances. I opened the door and he was standing on my porch in a charcoal blazer, hands in his pockets, with an expression I'd never seen on him before. Not the salesman's smile, something quieter, more confident. "Ray," he said, "can we talk?" We sat in my living room. He didn't take the wine I offered. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, and for a long moment he just looked at me like he was recalibrating something. Then he said, "I know about the ticket." I kept my face still. Years of engineering site meetings taught me that. How to receive information without broadcasting your reaction. "I think we need to have an honest conversation," he said, "about the future, about Sophie, about what makes sense." "What makes sense?" I repeated. "You're 63, Ray. You live alone. You don't have—" He paused like he was choosing words carefully, which meant he'd already chosen them. "You don't have a lot of people watching out for you. Something happens to you tomorrow. Where does all that money go? What's the plan?" "I have a lawyer," I said, "and a trust." Something shifted behind his eyes. "I'm sure you do. But family should be involved in these conversations. Sophie is your only daughter. She deserves to—" "I'll handle Sophie." He sat back. And that's when it happened. That's when the mask just slipped. Not all the way, just enough. He smiled, not his social smile, something thinner, and said almost quietly, "Ray, let's be real with each other. You're going to die soon. That money is already ours in every practical sense. The only question is how complicated you want to make the next few years." The room went very still. I could hear the refrigerator hum from the kitchen, the neighbor's dog barking once, twice, then stopping. The tick of Carol's mantel clock that I'd never been able to bring myself to move. He said it casually, like it was obvious, like I was slow for not having already arrived at the same conclusion. I looked at Derek Pruitt and felt something settle inside me that I can only describe as clarity. Not anger. That came later. First, it was just clarity. The particular calm of a man who suddenly understands exactly what kind of problem he's dealing with. I said, "You should go." He stood up, fixed his jacket, and at the door he turned back and said, "Think about what I said. I'm trying to save us all a lot of trouble." After he left, I sat in Carol's chair, the green one by the window she used to read in, and I didn't move for a long time. The next morning I called Donna. I told her everything Derek had said, word for word, including the exact phrasing I'd turned over 100 times by then. She was quiet for a moment and then said, "Ray, do you have a way to document that conversation if it ever happens again?" I asked what she meant. "I mean, Connecticut is a one-party consent state," she said. "You're allowed to record conversations you're a party to." I asked her what she'd recommend I do. She said, "First, we restructure the trust. Second, you call Sophie." Calling Sophie was the hardest part. I took her to lunch at a small Italian place on Church Street that she'd loved since college. I told her about the ticket over the breadbasket. She put both hands flat on the table and stared at me for a full 5 seconds without speaking, which was the most Sophie thing she could have possibly done. Then she said, Dad, I know. 95 million. 51 after taxes." She laughed, that overwhelmed, disbelieving laugh that was also almost crying. and reached across and grabbed my hand. And I let her sit with it for a minute before I told her the other part. I told her what Derek had said in my living room on a Thursday evening. The laugh stopped. I watched her process it. I watched her cycle through something complicated, not surprise exactly, more like the exhausted recognition of a pattern she'd been tracking for years, finally declaring itself. Her jaw set in that way she has. Carol's stubbornness, I was grateful for it. "He thinks I don't know who he is," she said finally. "I think he thought a lot of things," I said. She was quiet for a moment, then, "What are you going to do?" "I'm already doing it," I said. What I did was this. Donna and I restructured the trust completely. Sophie was named primary beneficiary, but through a vehicle Derek could never access, not during a marriage, not during a divorce, not under any legal framework he could exploit. We worked with a family law specialist to make sure of it. The structure was clean, documented, airtight. I also set up a separate gift, not from the lottery, from my existing savings, that went directly into an account in Sophie's name only. Enough for her to never need to calculate the cost of leaving. I didn't announce any of it. 3 weeks later, Derek invited me to dinner. His idea. He was warm, almost theatrical. Refilled my glass twice, asked about my health like he was genuinely interested, talked about a property he thought might be a great investment opportunity for someone in my position. I let him talk. I smiled. I said I'd think about it. On the drive home, I thought about the 31 years Carol and I had built together on 2 civil engineering salaries, Saturday morning farmers markets, and the understanding that real wealth is mostly invisible. And I thought about how little Derek Pruitt actually knew about the kind of man I was. The thing that happened next, I didn't plan. Sophie filed for divorce 4 months later. She told me she'd been thinking about it for over a year, and that what I'd told her had just cleared the fog. Her words, "It cleared the fog, Dad." Derek's attorney came in expecting a fight over significant assets. What they found instead was a prenuptial agreement that Sophie had quietly had drawn up by a different lawyer 3 years into the marriage, after a particularly bad period she'd never fully told me about. Donna had helped Sophie locate a good family attorney. Derek hadn't known about the prenup. He hadn't known about a lot of things. I'm 64 now. Sophie and I had Thanksgiving this year at my house for the first time since Carol died. Her friend Melissa came, and my neighbor Frank, and Donna and her husband. It was loud and a little disorganized, and Sophie burned the rolls because she was distracted, making everyone laugh about some story from her classroom. It felt like something returning. I don't talk about the money much. I've donated to the hospital where Carol was treated. I set up a scholarship in her name at the university where she got her nursing degree. I bought a small house in Vermont that I go to in October when the leaves turn. I still have Carol's green chair by the window. I still buy lottery tickets. $2 once a week. Not because I expect anything from them, but because hope is a habit I'm not ready to break. And sometimes, in the evenings when the house gets quiet, I think about Derek sitting across from me in my own living room, completely certain he'd already won. He'd looked at a 63-year-old widower living alone and seen a short clock ticking on a pile of money he considered inevitable. He'd never once stopped to wonder what 30 years of building things, bridges, roads, a marriage, a family, a life, actually teaches a person about structure, about patience, about knowing exactly where to place the weight so the whole thing holds. Some people mistake quiet for weakness. It's the last mistake they make. If someone in your life suddenly changed the moment they found out about your success, what was the first sign you almost missed?